Good evening. Welcome to a special edition of APTN National News. There are more than 14,000 Indigenous children under the age of 14 in the child welfare system. This year we are paying special attention to the topic. Today we begin with Twitter Mom, a woman who wants her children to come home. She took to social media to tell that story. Kathleen Martins has more.
My name is, I'm originally from, but I grew up in all my life, and I moved 9 years ago.
This is Twitter Mom. That's the nickname we've given her because of these messages she's tweeting out. She's posting details of her life, pictures of her children, their names, and their ages. As you see here, she has posted pictures of her home and business.
I'd met with an elder once, and he had told me to share my story in the open. And from there I went forward and I started to share my story.
Here's one of those tweets. I want my story to be an example of what is happening, not just with me, but with hundreds of thousands of parents. Not every child in care is there because the system worked properly. And not only that, but the system itself does great harm to children. This should be acknowledged.
Well, I feel as if I'm able to be a voice on Twitter because on Twitter I have a huge audience who's really paying attention to the issue.
But not everyone is happy with her making this public. What she's doing, showing her face and the faces of her children, is illegal because her children are still in foster care. Twitter Mom can be fined and spend years in jail for violating the law.
You'll see rules that talk more about no one shall make public, as opposed to no one will publish in any newspaper, radio station, or TV broadcasts.
Jonathan Croft is a media lawyer. He helps reporters figure out how to tell these stories without ending up behind bars.
Well, what do you think a judge is going to do with this? If it says press, does that include Facebook? And that's why reporting can be sometimes a little bit harrowing.
That's why we have to blur Twitter Mom's face and can't tell you her real name. But she's not letting that stop her. Here is her story in tweets. I am 34. I have been fighting to get my children returned back for 10 years. She says she was 16 when she had her oldest son and continued in school. Child welfare tried to get involved then, but her grandmother pushed them away. A second child followed. She writes, "But this is hard to admit. The dad was violent towards me and it got worse as time went on. I was trying to hold everything together for my kids, and because it was my son's dad, I wanted it to work out. I became pregnant again and I had my third son at the age of 24. She says there was abuse aimed at her. Then one day the school called to say her son was hurt. She took him to the hospital. She thought he had been hurt at school. Police got involved. They told her she was under arrest and accused her of hurting her son, which she denied over and over. She tweets, "After 11 hours they let me go. I called my mum from the first payphone I could find. She was crying. My mum told me police and CFS workers wearing medical gloves came and took the 2 boys. Her children were taken by social workers. She was only told after that her partner had hurt her son. She cut off contact with the man and says she has not seen or heard from him. She has had 3 home assessments since." She tweets, "My kids were apprehended in 2007. I saw one 3 times in 2008, then in 2010. I saw another one in 2009. I didn't see the other one until 2010. The eldest has since aged out of the system and moved back home. Officials tell us and families the law is there to protect the identities of children. But Twitter Mom says it has silenced her and helped cover up a system that should be held accountable for the decisions it makes.
And I feel that I'm a voice for a lot of women who can't speak.
Kathleen Martins, APTN News, Winnipeg.
As we heard in that piece, the law says that you cannot identify children in care or their parents. But as we also saw, Twitter Mom is doing just that. She could face a fine or even jail time. Kathleen Martin spoke more to her about that. Here's that story.
Yesterday I was asked for my children to go into permanent ward, but I'm fighting that. Today, 6 months free, going on free, doing all the programs they've asked of me, and I've done everything as of this day. And they've given
This is the usual way mothers have to get attention for the battles they're having with foster care. They beg for help, wave signs at a rally, and scream at politicians. But Twitter Mom is turning that on its head by posting details about her life and children here on social media, even though it's against the law.
They tried to quiet me by saying that they were going to sue me, charge me with a $50,000 fine and 2 years in jail, or both.
Because it's illegal to identify families in foster care, we can't reveal Twitter Mom's identity. We can't show you her smile or the intricate jewelry she makes. Any one of those things might help identify her children, even though she's putting the information out herself on social media.
In the beginning, they refused to let me see my sons, so I took legal action and started the GoFundMe page, which brought a lot of attention, and started the Twitter.
We asked the government to talk about Twitter Mom and the child welfare agencies she's dealing with, but they refused, saying that would violate the children's privacy. And as this tweet shows, they want Twitter Mom to stay quiet too. She tweeted about that. Overall, it's just unbelievable that after 10 years, after all levels of government publicly admit the system is dysfunctional, I have to raise tens of thousands of dollars to get a lawyer to get my kids back. That's right. Twitter Mom had to hire her own lawyer. It's something that shocked her friend.
You know, she's a victim of domestic violence. CFS should have supported her and her kids to be together during that time. And the person was charged eventually, and so there's no reason for her not to have her kids, and yet it's been 10 years. So her story is a lot of people's story, but it's also one of the worst cases that I've ever heard.
The foster care system is powerful. Twitter Mom says they did make her stop tweeting, but only over Christmas, because she says social workers threatened to take away the visits she was promised with her children. She tweeted, "They only permitted my boys to visit if I agreed to a number of conditions, what I felt was punitive measures, including not tweeting when the boys were in my care and having random visits and inspections of my daily life by workers, including Christmas Day and other things." Now, Twitter Mom is back online and vows to keep tweeting her story, despite the risks. So maybe, just maybe, she can bring her children home.
Pretty much the agency is saying I'm not cooperating, but I find that how can you cooperate with somebody who's had your kids for 10 years?
So is that...
I am cooperating. It's just that I'm being a voice and making it public.
Kathleen Martins, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
After the break, we catch up with APTN reporter Kenneth Jackson. He's trying to find answers about why a child died in care. Welcome back. When children are taken into foster care, the state becomes responsible for keeping them safe. Kanina Sue Turtle's family had questions when the 15-year-old child died by suicide. She filmed her own death while inside a foster home owned and operated by Tikanagan, an indigenous child welfare agency. Turtle's family say they have received very little information. APTN's Kenneth Jackson has been trying to find answers, and he joined us from Ottawa. Kenneth, thanks so much for joining us. Can you remind us again what you've learned about Kanina?
Kanina Sue Turtle died October 29, 2016 in Sioux Lookout, Ontario, Northern Ontario. She died in the back room of a foster home that was owned and operated by Tikanagan Child and Family Services. It's an indigenous it's an indigenous child welfare agency. She filmed her death, and on that video, which I've seen, she was alone for over 45 minutes before someone notices her. What we've learned also is that she was in the hospital multiple times prior to that, and also tried to attempt on her death the day before, also on tape, which I viewed as well. We've also learned that there was another suicide attempt in the days prior to her death, besides the one on the 28th, the day before, because she walked around, and forgive me for this, but she walked around with the bruising on her neck. I've seen the visual proof of this. So we've learned all this about Kanina, but there's based on that, I was trying to find some more information on her death and what was going on, and we've learned much more information.
Yeah, it's a disturbing case, Kenneth, though. What have you learned since digging into this all?
Well, you know, when I talked to her mom, she said to me, just abruptly said to me, she goes, they told me that, Tikanagan told me that she was in a so-called suicide pact, but her mother didn't believe it. So I was like, okay, well, that's interesting. Let me see what I can find out. And so what I ended up finding out was that her death is connected to two others at least. Jolene Winter died on January 8, 2017 in Wakapika First Nation. It made headlines. It was big news because that nation had noticed the suicide pact in the summertime, but was denied funding. Jolene, before being in Wakapika, at the time of her death, was in Sioux Lookout, and she was very close with Kanina. There's visual proof of them being together. I also have a video of Jolene attempting her suicide just before Kanina's death. It's awful. It's a terrible thing to hear, the sound of it. But I also connected Kanina's death to another girl from Poplar Hill First Nation, where Kanina's from, or was from, and that's Amy Owen. She died on April 17th, 2017 in an Ottawa group home. And when she was moved to Ottawa, or to Prescott originally, just before Kanina's death, Tikanagan told the group home owner and staff there that they suspect that she was in a suicide pact. So within 6 months, 3 girls were dead, all suspected of planning their death. And so that's essentially what we have. I have other names potentially that could be part of that, but I haven't been able to confirm that yet.
So Ken, what's being done here? What's the agency's response been to any of this?
Well, the agency has no response. Like, I mean, none. I haven't heard. When I told them that I knew of the suicide pact and that they knew, based on our information, they haven't responded. It's been over 9 days. Any response I have got from the agency has been, they won't talk out of respect for the family. Well, the family wants them to talk. The family wants answers. And they've asked me, or APTN, to try and find them out, or to find them. We've been trying. So that's taken me to the chief coroner of Ontario. And I've talked to him, and he's been conducting what he's calling an expert panel review of 11 deaths in care. So kids that were living in group homes, foster homes, agency-operated homes like Kanina's. He's looked at 11 files and found problems with them already. So he's expanded his review of those deaths, and they're ongoing. And they include Amy Owen, and they include Kanina. I believe they also include Jolene Winter, because he's been to Wakapika. He told me himself. Essentially, what I've been told by the Ministry from Ontario is that I'm asking for a response of what, is there a response to Tikanagan's responsibility for Kanina's death and the other girls? And they've essentially told me the coroner is reviewing all of it. So I believe the coroner's investigating these deaths again, because the coroner always investigates a death, but he's re-reviewing them, so to speak. And maybe in a few months we'll have some answers, I guess, I hope, into what happened into these 3 girls' deaths.
A long wait for the families. Kenneth, how's Kanina's mother holding up?
Quite upset. She's, they just lost power there for the reserve for 3 days. They had no power, no electricity, no light. They had no phone. But, she wants answers. But the last thing she told me was, she said that, I'm not giving up. I want to know what happened. I want to know why it happened. I want to know why my daughter was left alone for 45 minutes to film her suicide.
Kenneth, we're going to have to leave it there, but appreciate you looking into this story and for taking time to speak with us about it today.
Thanks for having me.
We're going to continue our look at the child welfare system after the break. Welcome back. If they never return home, children will grow up in foster care. Eventually, they become adults and age out. That age is different in every province and can be longer for kids with special needs. But in British Columbia, the age is usually 19 years old. Tina House asks, what happens next?
I'd say this doorway right here, I'd move spots from here and over on the other side. There's a lot of cars around here too. I did not have no coverage or nothing. It was just me, my clothes, a duffel bag I had at that time, and yeah, that's pretty much everything I had there.
Andrew Walkus aged out of care 5 years ago. He was immediately homeless.
It was kind of difficult, not being able to have something to eat most nights, and also feeling quite dehydrated, and I don't know, it just felt kind of lonely.
Walkus grew up in and out of care, living in approximately 10 different homes. His dad, a residential school survivor, drank and could not care for him at the time. After aging out of the system, Andrew was alone. He slept in this alley and sometimes in this park in a tent. 700 kids will age out of the foster care system this year in BC. On their 19th birthday, most will leave state care and be left to fend for themselves.
A lot of us describe it as a cliff where all of the supports around us evaporate because of arbitrary legislation.
22-year-old Dylan Cohen also aged out of the system. He'd been put in foster care at the age of 13, along with his twin sister, Haley. Their mother was unable to care for them. He says he was abused. He won't talk about the details.
I ran away. I put on a jacket and left my foster home in the country at minus 35 and fled for my safety.
And where did you go? What happened? Can you tell me the story?
Yeah, that night I was picked up by a police officer who tried to advocate for me to get charges pressed on me, and so that I would have somewhere safe to sleep that night. And I got thrown in the back of a police cruiser and taken to the shelter that I came into contact the first day I was in care. And I was in that shelter terrified, and after that couch surfed and went to other shelters and eventually found a not very suitable placement.
At 16, Cohen was deeply depressed. He says he even contemplated suicide.
I had a really dark mental health episode due to the foster care circumstances we're in.
But Cohen was also driven to activism. He got help from others in that community. Life's more settled now, and he has a job. He works full-time for an organization called First Call. They help kids that have aged out.
I want to make sure that there are emotional, social, financial resources for every youth that hits 19 or 18 in the system.
In 2017, Cohen organized a rally with other aged-out kids on the lawn of the BC legislature. They want better conditions for kids in the system and more support for those leaving.
I know that our experiences are often characterized by these really shameful and horrible abuses of the system, but it's up to us to do more, and up to society as a collective responsibility taker for youth in care to do more.
And one of those organizations doing more is Luma Native Housing. They have an initiative for youth housing. They also offer training in life skills and employment and meal programs every Monday and Wednesday night. This is where Amber Moon and Andrew Walkus gather with others who've aged out. And for Andrew Walkus, life just got a little bit tougher with the diagnosis of type 1 diabetes. And he's thankful for the help from Luma Native Housing.
Yeah, like I would go for at least a couple weeks at a time without eating if it wasn't for them. And even with the insulin too, I'm supposed to have 3 meals a day, otherwise I'd go in a coma.
19-year-old Amber Moon has learned how to cook from staff at Luma Native Housing. She lives upstairs in this studio apartment, along with her cat Lola and her lizard. She loves to play her ukulele and is very artistic. Amber also has big dreams to travel the world. These stickers mark the places she wants to go. When she was 7, Moon was put into foster care along with her brother and sister. Her mother was addicted to drugs, and her father, who suffered a brain injury, could no longer care for them. She was mostly well taken care of in the system, but the loss of her family still deeply affects her.
I feel like it's been pretty hard for me to see my parents the way that they are, but also I wish I could have lived with my parents, but at the same time I feel like that I have more opportunities that I've been in foster care.
A few years ago, her grandmother sent her these family photos.
It made me really happy because I've never seen these pictures before, and some of them are kind of funny. Yeah, and then this is my mom, my 2 oldest brothers, and there's me and my brother and my sister.
All of these former foster kids have different stories, but they have one thing in common: a rough start.
I feel like having more supports after somebody ages out, and also trying to fix the families first before taking away the children.
Their stories are not unlike so many others that have aged out. That's why they are considered the most vulnerable in our society.
You know, you take any teenager who's lived in a dozen placements, might be moving every year, might be going through 3 or 4 high schools like I did, and you're going to have some negative outcomes.
Tina House, APTN National News, Vancouver.
That is all the time we have for tonight. Keep watching this season as we continue to follow these stories and more about the child welfare system. I'm Dennis Ward. Have a good night.